Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Most Israelis are quite in favor of the war, but many hostage families and many of their supporters are very angry.
The world marks 1 year since the deadly Hamas attack on Israel and the ensuing violence in other parts of the Middle East. Plus,
so many people today across this province say that safety is the #1 issue.
more police, more judges, and some mandatory minimum sentences. The BC Conservatives outlined their public safety plan. And
I would like to see some creative thought about how we manage our elders.
as the provincial election inches closer, we take a close look at seniors' care.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The world is marking the anniversary of the October 7th attacks on Israel. 1 year ago, Hamas launched a violent assault that has since plunged the region into chaos. 1,200 Israelis were killed and hundreds taken hostage. And over the past year, thousands of Palestinians have been killed by Israel's military response in the Gaza Strip. Here in Vancouver, both communities are mourning their dead. Members of the Jewish community are holding a somber memorial at a synagogue, while downtown, a pro-Palestinian protest is calling for a ceasefire. Rafferty Baker brings us their stories of community and grieving.
For members of the Vancouver Jewish community, October 7th is a heavy day. Many have personal connections to the attacks, whether it's family or friends who survived, or in some cases killed or taken hostage. Those attacks killed more than 1,100 people, mostly civilians. The Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver is among the groups holding a memorial.
It's really going to be heavy on kind of the memorial aspect, less be it a solidarity gathering or a rally. It is very much a solemn occasion and most definitely a deeply sad memorial for our community.
The Vancouver Police Department has been making preparations and maintaining a high profile.
Today, being the anniversary, as you drive around the city of Vancouver, you'll see a significant police presence at places like faith-based schools, community centers, and religious houses of worship, places of worship.
The VPD Mobile Command Center is set up at the Jewish Community Center, and there's a police trailer with a 360-degree camera set up at the Shaare Zedek Synagogue. The building was the target of an arson attack earlier this year, and it's the venue for the memorial.
Again, there's no specific threat, but our objective is to work with the community to meet the community's needs and to provide that sense of comfort and safety and reassurance during a time when everybody's feeling a little bit on edge.
Police also maintaining a presence at a pro-Palestinian event downtown. Many officers were already on hand during preparations there this afternoon. Demonstrators there highlighting the more than 40,000 people in Gaza who, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, have been killed by Israeli forces in the last year. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
And this is a live shot of that gathering at the Vancouver Art Gallery, where pro-Palestinian demonstrators have begun to join others. The Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver will hold a memorial at 7 p.m. We will bring you more coverage later in the evening. BC Conservative Party leader John Rustad released his plans to improve public safety. It includes more cops, more judges, and some mandatory minimum sentences. But as Mira Baines reports, Rustad is facing criticism over whether his ideas can actually be done if he wins.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad arrived to reveal his public safety plan with his candidate for the new riding of Vancouver-Yaletown. Rustad wants more police, something already promised by the city's mayor.
Too many cases around this province where cities and the caseloads are way too high for police officers to be able to manage this. We need to end decriminalization.
Rustad has made at least 4 campaign stops in the downtown riding, where recently one man was killed and another was injured in random knife attacks.
We need change for this community. I hear from many people that they don't feel safe walking down the street.
Former Vancouver City Councillor Melissa DeGenova is facing off against NDP candidate, retired Vancouver police officer Terry Young. The BC Conservatives' public safety plan also includes creating a statutory court to hold trials for minor criminal offences within a week of arrest instead of a year or a year and a half, according to his estimates. Rustad said he would push for mandatory minimum sentences which fall under federal jurisdiction. He would hire more sheriffs and judges and toughen charge assessment guidelines. The party hasn't outlined the costs for this plan, but Rustad says voters will be able to see the budget for some initiatives when the party's full platform is released. BC Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau says she supports the use of modular housing as transitional housing for people living on the streets on Vancouver Island. She also called out the Conservatives today for lacking evidence-based solutions.
We hear from John Rustad that he says he's going to end homelessness, but he's going to shut down tent cities, which he knows the courts have made very clear he won't be able to do. Proposing to fix something but not offer any actual solutions that will do it is what we've been seeing again and again from John Rustad.
Meanwhile, the BC NDP leader announced promises for schools, which includes a mental health counselor for each school and more educational assistance.
We're committing to ensure that we deliver an educational assistant in every single kindergarten to grade 3 classroom in the province of British Columbia.
The three party leaders are set to go head-to-head Tuesday in a televised debate. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
John Rustad, meanwhile, says he, quote, misunderstood the question when he appeared to support putting public health officials involved in the COVID-19 response on trial, similar to how Nazi leaders were prosecuted after the Second World War. Take a look at how he responded to a question about what's referred to as Nuremberg 2.0 during a Q&A from July.
Are you okay or for a Nuremberg 2.0?
Bigger 2.0, sorry?
Nuremberg.
Nuremberg 2.0.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That's probably
I know that's a hard one.
Outside of my scope.
I know that puts you on the hot spot right there for sure, but I had to ask.
No, it's fine. It's like I say, those are something that's sort of outside the scope in terms of jurisdiction of British Columbia. But if we would certainly be participating with other jurisdictions as we look at those sort of issues.
On Sunday, Rustad wrote on social media that the comparison was, quote, unacceptable, and he has since apologized.
My comments in around that in any way relating the two, I apologize for that. I know that has offended some people, and it certainly was not my intent with regards to that issue.
Rustad has said he would form a panel of experts to, quote, give advice to government about how the COVID-19 pandemic was handled in BC. We will have more election coverage later in the show, and the leaders of BC's three major political parties are set to face off in a televised debate Tuesday night. You can watch it here from 6:30 to 8 p.m. live on TV, live on CBC Radio 1 and CBC News BC, our 24/7 streaming channel. It will be moderated by Shachi Curl, president of the Angus Reid Institute. To other news now, police in Surrey say drug impairment is believed to have played a role in a crash that killed a man and injured another late Saturday afternoon. Surrey Mounties say the driver is a 44-year-old man and was arrested on scene for dangerous and impaired operation causing death. He was treated at the hospital for minor injuries and has since been released. Mounties say a Ford F-350 was heading north on 144th Street when it veered into the oncoming lane and then collided with a bus bench, killing a 33-year-old man, while a second man was taken to hospital for minor injuries. A deal is now on the table to potentially save a small northern BC community nearly $5 million in water treatment costs after construction on the nearby Site C Dam compromised their water supply. Hudson's Hope received a significant offer from support from BC Hydro to fully fund a surface water system and the monthly cost of a rental treatment plant until the permanent one is ready. The district voted over the weekend in favor of allowing itself to borrow money from the company to do that building. Since the early stages of the Site C Dam project, residents have faced issues with their tap water. Businesses are assessing the damage after a fire tore through a building in Langley, the city of Langley, over the weekend. Some owners are still without power as crews work to restore structures with water and smoke damage. As John Hernandez explains, the city's mayor says many buildings on the affected block are not up to modern fire codes.
Got a tag of $2,500 for Darth Vader that's, smoke damaged.
There's countless collectibles inside Shane Constantinescu's Langley shop. Water and smoke flooded into the store as fire crews battled a next-door blaze on Saturday.
By the time I got down here, it was fully engulfed, and they had like 6 pumper trucks on it, and at that point, I thought we were losing everything.
The fire tore through a building which housed a Mexican restaurant, a physiotherapy clinic, and office spaces. Constantinescu is thankful his store is still standing, but he's now trying to figure out what can be salvaged.
Everything we have is, usually a one-off or a custom prop, or it's valuable. And so with the smoke and the water damage, if the packaging gets damaged, it's almost worth more than the product. The concern I have with the Yeti is that the smoke's going to get into his fur, and we're not going to be able to get it out, and which deems him pretty much a useless product for anybody.
As he tries to save what he can, crews have since demolished the building next door. The owners of the now destroyed Viva Mexico restaurant didn't respond to requests for an interview, but in social media posts said they're going through a very difficult time and vowed to come back stronger. The restaurant among a handful of popular Latin American businesses on this stretch of downtown.
A lot of the businesses are started by newcomers, and we've seen over time that where maybe traditionally people would have come to Burnaby or even Surrey, they're moving to Langley.
But many of the buildings on this historic street are decades old and not up to current fire codes. The city says it's working to change that.
Langley City, as I'm sure other communities, are very firm when there's renovations that take place. We do require sprinklers and other systems we put in.
The cause of the fire is still under investigation. John Hernandez, CBC News, Langley.
A man has now been charged with multiple criminal offenses after police say he intentionally set a van on fire outside Vancouver City Hall Sunday night. Police say firefighters managed to put out the blaze, but inside that smoking hulk, they found roughly 100 liters of unburned gas in canisters. The suspect was arrested and no one was hurt. Police say this was an isolated incident and the suspect acted alone. A man with a lengthy criminal record is back in jail after Vancouver police say he stole a police car on Sunday morning. Here's Sergeant Steve Addison.
Involved in a very high-profile incident at Templeton Park, where a prolific offender, more than 50 criminal convictions, actually stole a police car while officers were out of the car helping somebody in distress, drove it onto a turf field at Templeton Park near where families were playing at the playground and kids were gathering for soccer.
The VPD is condemning the behavior, saying the 41-year-old suspect could have killed or seriously hurt innocent people. A police dog eventually took him down. Darius Madavi joins us with a first look at the weather. Decent day on the south coast, at least.
Yeah, it was a fairly nice day. We had that rainfall warning on the west coast of the island, up to 100 millimeters expected. That rainfall warning has now come down, but we do still have high stream flow advisories up much of the coast, as well as a single flood watch. But overall, things are calming down a little bit, but still some more precipitation on the way across the province. We have those showers breaking into the interior, but not looking at any lightning right now. Doesn't seem like we're going to have proper storms today, although that might be coming tomorrow. And then we have that moisture streaming into the south coast, making its way down the island, should reach us here on the lower mainland overnight tonight. Now, if we take a look at the precipitation forecast, you can see that making its way again down the island. Some showers arrive overnight tonight here in Vancouver. Continues to make its way further inland. We're going to see some clearing up at times throughout the day tomorrow here in Vancouver, but that cloud will move back in for the overnight period. And then it's not until Wednesday that we see the next wave of precipitation come in, make its way here to Vancouver. Possibly some showers in the morning, but it will be fairly dry. And then the afternoon seems like when we'll get most of that precipitation here in Vancouver and in the Fraser Valley as well. And then overall, besides that, Dan, things seem fairly calm. Overnight tonight, still some showers breaking into many places throughout the province, but again, temperatures are fairly seasonal. It's nothing that the coast is not used to. And here in Vancouver, overnight tonight, again, some showers possible, showery overnight, and then we should start to see some clearing up through the morning.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
As this province inches closer to Election Day, October 19th, British Columbians are thinking about the issues they want reflected in their new Premier's policies. One is seniors' care. After the break, we take a closer look at what's missing and who is calling for better care. Stay with us. The BC Supreme Court has begun hearing submissions to certify a class action lawsuit about Indigenous children in care. The suit claims BC's child welfare system prioritized removing children from their homes over culturally appropriate prevention services and supports to Indigenous children and families. Laura Dobson is one of 4 plaintiffs.
So with having been removed, I missed out on a lot of spending time with elders, our food, our language, our people, the land. And then being taken away and then going back much later, realizing that I had such a big family that I wasn't aware of.
The provincial and federal governments deny the allegations. With the BC election campaign well underway, so is the debate over seniors' care. Parties have outlined plans on home care affordability and which facilities to pay for. As Bell Puri reports, though, one concern is coping with limited care spaces for seniors.
The episodes were telling. Joan Ball would forget. In particularly frightening incidents, she would wander.
She would go out and not be able to find her way back.
Her family knew the octogenarian couldn't live alone anymore. The healthcare system disagreed.
It seemed like you had to be fairly not doing very well at all before you could even qualify, and from there you could wait another year.
Once, Joan was even sent home from hospital on a stretcher. Last December, she finally got a spot in long-term care.
I would like to see some creative thought about how we manage our elders, how we care for people.
BC is far behind in its commitment to build more spaces for seniors.
In 2017, it was predicted we would need 30,000 new long-term care spaces by 2035. And since then, the ones that have been opened and planned to be opened by 2030 amount to about 7,000.
Spots in assisted living are a similar game of chance.
He said 4 years it will take. I said, no, I don't need for after 4 days. I may be not alive at time because I am having a hard time now.
Sitwant Gorkamar was lucky, but vacancies are unpredictable.
There is a lineup of people who want to come here, who need that care.
There are 49 units in this 18-year-old Fraser Health assisted living facility.
We have one resident who's been here from the day it opened, okay? And then some have been here for 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. Depends on the stage of their life, their condition. Some have to be moved on to long-term care facilities or to hospitals, and some pass away. But average, 7 to 10 years.
A sister building, a 125-bed long-term care home, is in the works.
We get calls now, when can we move in? I said, we have to wait.
The $123 million complex was supposed to have opened this year. COVID and design issues are blamed for a 2-year delay. When it comes to elections, seniors tend to have the highest voter turnout, and candidates appear eager to win them over. The NDP focus is on improvements it's made over the last 7 years.
We added 1,000 beds for seniors, and we are doing 24 more facilities working with non-profit sectors and others. It's not only the public sector.
The BC Greens promise to increase publicly funded long-term care beds by 10% per year.
The prime goal is to keep people out of these beds, I think, and so, improving health care and improving access for people that want to take care of their family members at home, giving them either a tax rebate or give them even a kind of a grant situation.
The Conservative Party proposes a patients-first healthcare model.
We will be increasing 5,000 beds across the province by 2030. We will be providing tax credits to the healthcare givers, and we will be developing more infrastructures and more facilities.
In the next 4 years, just in time for the next provincial election, 1/4 of British Columbians will be seniors.
I'm scared, actually. I don't want to be in that point where there's when we need it and it's not there.
Whichever party forms government after October 19th, clearly it needs a comprehensive strategy for seniors' care. Bell Puri, CBC News, Surrey.
At 6:23, a live look at Deep Cove. Darius Madavi will be back with a look at the BC-wide weather forecast right after this. Healthcare in this province is always a hot-button issue, even more so as the provincial election approaches. The BC Conservatives have introduced their healthcare plan, if elected, promising to implement what they call activity-based funding. Hospitals would, for example, receive funding based on when they treat patients for specific diagnoses and procedures versus the current model of providing base funding. Joining us to talk about this model is Jason Morris, a political science senior instructor at the University of Northern British Columbia. Jason, thanks for being here. First of all, the Conservative Party says this activity-based funding model, quote, incentivizes providers to be more efficient and treat as many patients as possible. What about concerns that would this actually lead to better care?
Hey, thanks for having me. It makes sense if you think of it on the face of it, that the more you do, the more you might get paid, like lawyers, accountants, and even doctors operate that way. But at the same time, we're talking about a very complex healthcare system, and it's sometimes hard to find out where you go to make things move along faster.
And what would this mean, for example? It's one thing to treat a lot of people, for example, at a major trauma center, Royal Columbian, Vancouver General, Surrey Memorial. But what about for rural and smaller hospitals that don't treat as large a volume of patients?
We know that where we live in BC, as in many other provinces, impacts the access to the services that you have. And some kind of blanket policy that says this is going to be here simply won't work. Any program would have to be tailored to what those places, what those hospitals are already able to provide with the diagnostic equipment, with the human resources like the nurses and the doctors and the beds to recover in, and so on.
And is implementing activity-based funding, do you think, a realistic promise? And if so, how quickly could that switch happen? We're talking about a lot of change.
It would be a significant change. BC did a pilot project on this back in 2010, and wait for it, but the health services minister then was Kevin Falcon, and looked at this for emergency department times and kind of like getting a bonus if you met targets. And it was really hard to tell the impact this had. A little scholarly project found, not so much. And as well, just to roll it out would be such a significant change again when hospitals are used to getting a single all-purpose global budget. They're not used to, putting money in a meter and then taking the service from there.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. Many British Columbians, as we've heard, don't have a family doctor. Do you think activity-based funding would help address that at all?
I'd say that this initiative looks at doing the actual intervention. Maybe it's the surgery, and reforms to healthcare have got to back up to some fundamental issues, such as our first point of contact for care. If someone is lacking a family doctor, sure, there are urgent care centers and walk-in clinics, but effectively they don't have access. They're uninsured, and the parties on the campaign trail should be looking at these real basic but also important healthcare situations.
Jason Morris from the University of Northern British Columbia, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Cheers.
Thank you.
All across the province, people are preparing for Election Day. We took a stop in Kelowna, asking people there about what their thoughts on the upcoming debate, the candidates, and some of the key issues for them.
So, are you going to watch the debate tomorrow evening?
No, I'm not, because I don't want to listen to what they got to say. I know what they got. Anybody can say what they want before the election. I'd rather watch the ball game.
Have you already made your decision for the election?
Yes, I'll definitely be voting Conservative.
I don't vote for a party. I vote for who I think is the best candidate in my area.
What issues are important for you?
Homelessness, school support, childcare.
Climate, for sure. Climate and environment and the housing crisis.
There's a big homeless population in Burton, and just like Kelowna has too, it'd be nice to see more supportive housing come in.
BC, meanwhile, will have 6 new ridings in this election, and many other ridings will have been redrawn. The CBC's legislative reporter, Katie DeRosa, looks at some of the ridings that could be key battlegrounds. Tonight, Vancouver Point Grey, where David Eby is fighting for re-election.
It's a riding that includes UBC students as well as some of the richest British Columbians in Vancouver. NDP leader David Eby is facing off against Paul Ratchford for the BC Conservatives and Devani Singh for the BC Greens in Vancouver Point Grey. While Eby won by a comfortable margin in 2020, one data scientist said the riding's new boundaries could make Eby's re-election far from a sure bet. The new riding boundary to the east is Balsam Street, which cuts off a large section of renters near Kitsilano. The riding also includes a new section of single-family homes in the Dunbar area.
The net total is actually a decline in renters by about 2,100 households, renter households that are no longer in this riding.
Yan's research of voter demographics shows ridings with a large proportion of renters tend to support the NDP.
It is the riding of a sitting premier, so that it kind of offers a certain levels of incumbency protection, but yet there are limits to the incumbency protection, as we saw with Christy Clark. So.
Eby first clinched the riding in 2013, a young activist unseating a sitting premier. It was a personal victory for Eby, but a crushing defeat for the NDP, which failed to topple Clark's BC Liberal government. Eby spoke with CBC News the day after he won.
It's a bittersweet day for our campaign as we look at what happened across the province. A bunch of people really disappointed by that, but at the same time, we're ecstatic that we beat the Premier in Vancouver Point Grey. I mean, that is a historic result.
Some of the waterfront homes in Vancouver Point Grey include the $80 million mansion belonging to Lululemon founder Chip Wilson. Last week, a sign was put up outside of his home that calls the NDP a communist party. It was later defaced with spray paint.
The sign on Chip Wilson's property is really important because it reflects whose side John Rustad is on. He's on the side of Chip Wilson. He's on the side of the billionaires and the real estate speculators.
Eby says he's confident his record holds up against Ratchford's, pointing to comments he made against BC Conservative candidate Eleanor Sturco while she was still with BC United. Ratchford called her a woke lesbian, but Sturco says he has since apologized for those comments. Ratchford claims Eby is scared of losing government and his own seat. Even as polls indicate a very tight race between the Conservatives and NDP, Eby is projecting optimism about his own riding and the election overall. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
On the anniversary of the October 7th Hamas attacks, people across the world are reflecting on that day's horrific killings and the violence that has ensued in Gaza and Lebanon since. After the break, more from Jerusalem and reaction across Canada.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Returning to our top story tonight, exactly 1 year ago, Hamas militants entered Israel, killing about 1,200 people and taking 250 hostages. The conflict it sparked still rages, and it's not just between Israel and Hamas. Houthis fired rockets at the Jewish state from Yemen today, while Hezbollah did the same from Lebanon. Israel continued to hit Beirut and has warned the Lebanese people of its intention to strike the country's southern coast. But today, most Israelis are focused on the site where it all began. Sasha Petrusik reports from southern Israel, where a music festival became a massacre.
At daybreak, music pulses through southern Israel, just like a year ago at the Nova Festival. Back then, thousands danced with joy. Now hundreds are remembered in sorrow. Right after this song last year at 6:30, sirens wailed, rockets flew, and heavily armed Hamas militants stormed in. Festival goers tried to run, but 40 people were taken hostage, 364 killed.
This nightmare wasn't supposed to happen.
Among the dead, Noah Faraj. Her mother can't imagine why.
We don't accept it. There's no room for hate, revenge, anger, no.
But even here, grieving is pierced by the guns of continued conflict. Artillery shooting into Gaza next door. Israel's leaders vowing to continue fighting until total victory, including destroying Hamas's rule and military capabilities. Some 1,200 people died in the October 7th attack, 250 taken hostage.
It was the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but unlike the Holocaust, we fight back.
Israel has stretched itself to fight this war, with some reservists spending 300 days in Gaza. Yovav Tzur says it was his duty after the Hamas attack.
We saw the devil that day.
But he also blames Israeli leaders who failed to protect the country.
We don't want it to happen again. We believe that we need to do something extreme.
Communities across the South, devastated by October 7th, had their own ceremonies. But after losing so many, including more than 100 people in Nir Oz, there are misgivings. With the war still raging, just a few kilometers from here in Gaza, and even widening up north, and with almost 100 people still held hostage, including some from Nir Oz, this kibbutz, many say it's not possible to memorialize October 7th. It's just too soon, too painful.
We are still deep, deep in the trauma. We are not out of it. Not yet. I hope someday it will come.
Not possible, say hostage families, until their loved ones are back. And at this protest ceremony, they say the Prime Minister hasn't tried hard enough. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Reim, Israel.
The conflict between Israel and Hamas has expanded to include people in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iran. But as the CBC's Chris Brown explains, over the past year, it's been the Palestinians in Gaza and the Israeli-occupied West Bank who have been most affected.
Sunrise in Gaza reveals the utter enormity of the damage inflicted by Israel's attacks over the past year. There were no gatherings or services here, just more despair and anguish. Israeli strikes in Gaza City have killed at least 52 people in the past day, say local Palestinian medics. The youths were sitting and doing nothing, and the rocket fell on them, said this bystander. They're innocent people. There's no resistance. Hamas marked the one-year anniversary of their murderous attacks by firing off rockets at Israel, injuring 2 people, an indication perhaps that after all the destruction and mass displacement, the militant group is hurt but not defeated. According to Gaza health officials, 42,000 people have been killed and 97,000 injured, with many of the survivors losing everything.
This year destroyed everything that I did for the last 6 years of my life.
A videographer working for CBC News in Gaza talked to Mohammed Adda, a 25-year-old medical student who would have graduated to become a doctor this year.
I am full of hopes, but in this year I had to burn it with my own hands, because if I didn't do this, the Israeli rockets will destroy it instead of me. So my hopes is getting smaller.
For many Palestinians in the West Bank, this was a day of defiance against Israel's long occupation and to show solidarity with the people of Gaza.
Here in the West Bank, it's also been a year of despair, with impeded movement, an economy in ruins, and escalating attacks from emboldened Jewish settlers.
Sumaya Qasim told us she cannot feel happiness anymore. Kids are dying, their arms and legs are cut off. What kind of future can they have, she said. Her words were sadly prophetic. As we spoke to her nearby at Kalandia, Palestinian youths clashed with Israeli forces who fired with live bullets during a raid on the refugee camp. 12-year-old Hatem Raith was shot in the abdomen and killed, making him one of the nearly 700 Palestinians killed by Israel's military or settlers here in the past year, and leaving yet another mother in mourning. Chris Brown, CBC News, Ramallah.
The United Jewish Appeal Federation of Greater Toronto, meanwhile, is marking the anniversary of the day Hamas militants attacked Israel. Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism spoke out ahead of an event organized by the group, which will happen tonight.
I am here as Israel's special envoy because the very same anti-Semitism that fueled the atrocities of October the 7th, that murdered and raped and butchered and abducted, is the anti-Semitism that fuels the responses to those atrocities, those war crimes, those crimes against humanity.
The organization is using the gathering to remember those who were murdered on October 7th, to honor those who survived, and to reaffirm solidarity with the hostages and their families. In Montreal, pro-Palestinian demonstrators moved around Concordia University. They want to bring attention to the crisis in Gaza. The enclave's Hamas-run health ministry says more than 41,000 people have been killed over the past year, including civilians and militants. Outside McGill University, meanwhile, a memorial was held to commemorate the victims of the attack. Both events took place amid an increased police presence in the city. Hurricane Milton has now strengthened into a dangerous Category 5 storm in the Gulf of Mexico. It's the second major storm headed toward Florida in less than 2 weeks.
This storm has a potential, and it looks like could be a lot worse than Helene. Get out if you're in an evacuation zone. Don't take chances. There's no tomorrow if you are caught in the midst of this storm.
The state is preparing for its largest evacuation in 7 years. Milton is projected to make landfall on Wednesday, likely in the heavily populated Tampa Bay area. It could remain a hurricane as it moves across the state toward the Atlantic Ocean. Much of Florida's west coast and the Miami area are under hurricane and storm surge warnings. This comes on the heels of the catastrophic storm Helene, which swamped the coastline on September 26th. It then ripped through several other states, killing more than 200 people and leaving behind a swath of destruction. Darius Madavi now back with our 5-day forecast, but a quick check-in on what is happening with Milton.
Yes, this is just the last couple hours. We're seeing it move closer to the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 5 hurricane. If we zoom out here, you can see the track that it's expected to take, as you mentioned, Dan, right over the Tampa Bay area. Many hurricane warnings in place as a result, and even though it's expected to lose some strength as it moves closer to Florida, it will still be a major hurricane at landfall. And I also want to emphasize, again, Tampa is not an area that's super accustomed to hurricanes. It hasn't been hit by one, certainly not a major one, in the last century. And if we layer on here the distance in this error bar, you can see fairly big error at this point because we're still about 48 hours out from landfall. This is the difference between a $100 billion disaster and a $10 billion disaster. So a lot of uncertainty still here, and we're going to, of course, keep you posted as things change, but expect them to change in the days ahead. We're already seeing some heavy rain being pushed towards Florida. We're looking at some very high storm surge, up to 4 meters, over 4 meters in some areas. So potentially very risky storm, especially given just how strong it is. You can see how defined the eye is there and how quickly it formed in just 48 hours, going from a basically nothing unnamed storm to a Category 5 hurricane. So Dan, we're looking at potentially some real damage being done here, and one for the history books for sure. Now, I want to talk about the precipitation here in Vancouver because some of it is still moving over much of the province. Now, we're just seeing some showers, some snow up at those higher elevations and up in the north. But generally, now that that rainfall warning has come down, the next few days should be quite a bit calmer for the most part. Some places, like on the central and north coast, may still get some fairly heavy precipitation at times, but more calm than it has been in the past few days and certainly last week. Now, temperatures in the southern interior remain a little bit above seasonal, 3 or 4 degrees. They start to come down as we get into the end of this week. Here on the coast, we stick around where we are right now, which is pretty close to seasonal, so not too bad. Across the province tonight, expect to see some thunderstorms in a few, across the province tonight, some showers tonight. As we get into tomorrow, some thunderstorms across parts of the central interior, as well as in some places along the coast here. Prince Rupert, Bella Bella, both expecting to see the potential for some thunderstorms tomorrow. Here on the coast, just some showers coming in and out, the south coast, I should say. And a 5-day forecast, we do have that clearing up sort of midday into the afternoon at times, but then cloud moving back in tomorrow, and then some more showers as we head into Wednesday, and then a little bit of sunshine, Dan.
Okay. Would you lead us in a deep breath, please?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Darius, you're here to tell us about this year's winners of the Nobel Prize in Medicine.
Yes, that's right. And it's these two gentlemen right here, Victor Ambros and Gary Ruvkin. Now, they discovered something really incredible, and we're still grappling with the implications of their discovery that happened back in the 1990s, actually. Here they are again. And what they discovered is called microRNA. You can see it here. And what is microRNA? It sounds a lot like mRNA, like the vaccines, but this is a different kind of RNA. This is mRNA here. MicroRNA is what binds to it, and that is very, very important. It is in all of our cells, and that is the reason that we have different cells. So generally speaking, you go from DNA to mRNA. That turns into proteins, and the proteins that your cells make determines what kind of cell they are. So different cells will express different genes and give you different cell types, like the neuron versus the muscle. That is really important, but every single cell has all the same DNA. So how do you get different cell types if they're all coming from the same instruction manual? Well, you have to have things that take certain pages out of that instruction manual and tell you which ones to read. And that is what microRNA does. It blocks anything that should not be made in that cell type from being produced. And that is a very important function of our cells. So rather than going from DNA to mRNA and then into protein, this microRNA then blocks it. It binds to it very tightly, like a little hug, and it prevents it from being created, and that prevents the protein, and that keeps you in regulation. But when microRNAs go wrong, you get all kinds of diseases, but they also hold a lot of promise for both treating those diseases and many others. So again, early stages of this research, even though it's been about 30 years, but the potential here, Dan, is huge.
Amazing. MicroRNA always running defense. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Still to come, we meet one Vancouver Island retiree doing his part to combat our climate crisis. Stick around. Big news out of the soccer world. Christine Sinclair, the pride of Burnaby and the world's top goal scorer for men or women, is the newest owner of the Vancouver women's professional soccer team.
When this opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer for me because the future of soccer in Canada depends on the Northern Super League, depends on clubs like the Vancouver Rise, and I am honored and privileged to be a part of it.
Vancouver Rise FC says the 41-year-old Canadian soccer legend will join majority owner Greg Kerfoot ahead of the Northern Super League's first season starting in April.
And a Vancouver Island retiree is doing his best to make a difference for the environment by creating biochar, the product of partially burned organic material like leaves and tree bark.
He says he's created about 20,000 pounds of biochar over the past few years, which can be used in gardening and compost to enrich soil. Claire Palmer caught up with him in Courtenay.
Biochar has been specifically made. It's not just a random, sort of leftover product. We stop the process before it turns to ash. Then we've actually locked that carbon into that charcoal. I was approaching retirement, so say about 4 years ago, when I was thinking a lot about the climate change issue, and I was really asking myself the question, what could I do to make any kind of a difference? Because I felt kind of hopeless about it. I really didn't know what biochar was and didn't really quite get it, how it worked. So I read that chapter in the book on it, and then that just piqued my interest. So the process of pyrolysis, converting the wood to charcoal, you need to achieve the temperatures of around 500 degrees Celsius or hotter. And the other thing is you need to take the oxygen out of the equation. Every time we add another layer of wood onto that pile of charcoal, then the oxygen is drawn to the top of the pile and it takes it out from the bottom of the pile. So the charcoal that's underneath that pile doesn't get any oxygen anymore. It's a double ring of steel and that gap between them. Now it's sealed at the ground level, so no air can get to the fire through the bottom. If it was able to do that, the air would hit that mass and then go through it and then up, and it would shoot your flames up and sparks up like a Roman candle. And that's exactly what we don't want to have. The biggest thing is putting it in our compost, because it's a great activator in the compost.
It's a no-brainer for us, yeah. Since Greg's been into biochar, we've been able to take our waste, tree waste, and any pallets that don't meet the grade to ship out on, we can convert that to biochar, add to our compost, and just keep that nutrient cycle going around and around. You know, as humans, we're pretty good at taking away, but when you can add something, it just makes you feel a bit like you've done something worthwhile at the end of the day, eh?
I hope this can be inspiring for young people too, because I really do believe that for a lot of young people that there's a feeling of hopelessness about the future of our world. And maybe this is a way for me to show them that actually there are some things that people can do.
So good for gardens, but you and I both had the similar question. You're still burning stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't know where it's getting sequestered to. Maybe in the deeper layers of the soil.
Possibly,
maybe?
yeah. I mean, we were listening closely.
Yes, I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll get back to you with that answer.
Yeah, there you go. From the scientist and the non-scientist.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Michelle Gassoub is here at 11 for you right after the National. Good night.